Welcome back to Not Enough Projects. Today we're back on this stunning 1973 Dodge Dart. Last time we were working on this, we got basically all the mechanicals sorted out for the most part, running and driving. So this time we're going to be diving into the interior, which, as you can tell, we got quite a lot to do. We're going to start off by replacing our floor pan on the driver's side. Probably a leaky seal, has been leaking for the past 40 years or whatever, and pooling water on the floor, so you see that's MIA. But first up, we're going to want to get the seat out. So I believe the seat has two nuts that go up from the underside on both sides, so let's pop those out and we can get this seat right out. There's one of them, and I'm going to go to the other side and this should lift right out. Already got leaves blowing on it, crazy. Better be careful not to tear the carpet. And I just realized we should probably take our seatbelts out because I bet you that's hanging us up. Alright, we're free on the driver's side. Okay, well that was not the most graceful, but we got it out. All kinds of goodies down here. And disgusting ashtrays, armrests. You think we can save this carpet? Yeah, right. Okay. Let's just take the front section out first and then go from there. I think this is all getting trashed. I don't see any good hardware or anything, but we'll double check. That is gross. So it seems like the only really rotten part is the very front section, which is nice, because we should be able to just graft from there on. But we'll see once we get everything out. And the passenger side has some of that scaly rust, but we'll see. I'm hoping it's solid enough that we only have to do the footwell on the driver's side. And we're not going for, 89-point restoration or anything. Okay, so now we got a good picture. So back here it looks pretty solid. Obviously we're gonna wire wheel everything and make sure it's all good. We'll see. I don't think we have any major rot back here. We're gonna probably hit it with a ball peen, just make sure it doesn't break through. If it doesn't, then same deal. We'll just clean her up and paint. Make sure it's all sealed up. Unfortunately, it does look like on the passenger side, let's go over there. It looks like towards the front here, we've got rot, so we're gonna have to do that. No biggie, but it's better back here. So there's that. So we're definitely gonna want to be replacing our window seals. I'm guessing that's how all this water got in. And then it just pools and wreaks havoc. This car, I believe, spent most of its life in Portland and Oregon. They don't really salt that much, so this is more just sitting and accumulating water, I think. So that's good. If it was salt, we'd probably see a lot less floor pan. We're looking pretty good here. So I'm gonna just spend a little bit of time, vacuum up all this junk, and then we'll get our new floor pan and kind of see where the seams meet. So I've got basically everything cleaned up. Of course, we got junk blown in here. Let's just do a test fit, lay in our floor panel, see exactly where it's gonna lie. I believe it goes from seam to seam. So it is this seam up to that seam there where we have all the seam compound. We're probably going to need to use just the whole panel. I mean, there's no real sense in reusing this when it's so crusty. Although this floor is solid where it counts. Seat mount and seat belt and everything. Passenger side, with it cleaned up, it's looking worse. It's better down here, but it's actually, hopefully the driver's side isn't going to pull back that insulation, but it's kind of rotted up above the floor seam. I don't think they make that, so we'll probably have to get some flat sheet and just do some simple repairs on that. Anyways, let's actually peel this back real quick and check. Okay. Yeah, it's crusty, but I don't think it's rusting through anywhere. we'll get a better idea once we have the floor section out. I don't really understand what this rag is. Apparently that vent leaked. So while they're driving, they were feeling air or something. I don't know. Alright, let's lay the new pan in. What's hidden on our panel? This little protective thing for the wire loom. I don't even fully see how it attaches. Oh, it's spot welded, okay. Alright, so I'm going to fold this back, and we may just need to rip it off for now. Not probably strictly needed anyways, but it's got to come off for now. Alright, I'm going to get that off. We need to get our dimmer switch out of the way. Ah, okay, I see. So the floor has a folded end here, and that's where it meets with the, I guess that's the firewall panel. I don't think we're going to be able to access that, which is fine. So I think we need to investigate how far back we really need to go. Probably all the way to the seam. Oh yeah, look at that. We see some light. Well, I don't know if we can access that from the bottom. Maybe what we do is just cut the current floor up to the seam, or just close to the seam. We can split it from there, and if we can access from the bottom, I guess we could check that right now. So here's that floor seam I'm talking about. Looks like partially we can access from the bottom, but not very well. So yeah, I say we cut from the seam, and from the top we may be able to separate it from this firewall seam with the air hammer or something. Yeah, so I say we go from there, and then you can see this hump is this hump. So let's lay it in and kind of mark where we can cut, and obviously we'll cut inboard of that to begin with. Okay, so I say let's just cut low for now, like down here, just above the rust, because we don't necessarily need to go to the max height. So we only have 1 or 2 supports that we got to deal with. This cross member here for the torsion bar, and the one that goes forward. There's also one support going this way, but if we just start in the middle and work our way out, cutting wise, then we should be good. So I think what I'm going to do is just start basically just cutting back metal. We just need to get the floor out. So I'll just cut here, start peeling away metal, avoiding any cross members. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm just cutting right in front of that seam, trying to separate the floor pan from the firewall, because I think that's what we're going to need to do. And I don't see why we can't just weld that seam solid. That way we don't have to mess around with plug welding from the bottom. So I think that's what we'll probably end up doing. You kind of get the picture. I'm just going to keep doing that, get all the totally rotted stuff away. Probably cut back to around here where there's solid metal, all the way back. This middle section really isn't bad. I'm kind of half tempted to just do 2 sections, but we'll see. So I'll probably leave that for a second. Cut out this rear section right here, just where it's real bad. Probably stay along this part before the seam, because that looks fairly solid. We'll find out. And I'll just bring it back once I got this removed and the rest of the front. Alright, so that escalated a little bit. I ended up deciding it'd probably just be easiest if I undo all the spot welds. Obviously we're still going to have to do just a butt weld on the center, since we're not doing the whole floor pan, which honestly at this point I should have just gotten the complete floor pan. I mean, it would be less work, but that's okay. Now that I think about it, I totally should have just gotten the full floor pan. It includes the transmission tunnel and everything, but that's alright. I undid the spot welds up there and then all the way along the side. Still got a lot of cleanup to do, but I think we can go ahead and test fit and at least get an idea of where we need to cut on here. It should probably be about that much. Okay, so that's about where we're looking. This is going to sit down quite a lot more. The problem is the front of our floor pan. The problem is we're not sitting down in the groove, because Obviously, it's part of the tunnel. The tunnel's still there. So I think we just trim back little by little up front here. We'll start with a couple inches until we get it to sit down. Then the rest back here will just lie flat against the tunnel. We can mark and get a final cut there. But overall, we're looking pretty good. Pretty happy with the fitment. Looks like we are gonna need to cut a hole for a seatbelt bolt. Guessing a different gear had it right here, or maybe that's for buckets or something along those lines. But it's looking pretty close. Everything is gonna move forward a little bit once we get it down into the groove. But yeah, looking good. I'm gonna cut away a little bit of the front part of the tunnel and we'll go from there. Okay, so we are really close. See back here, we're sitting just about where we want to be. Looks like we need to go forward a hair on here, if possible. Which you can see, we got a gap we got to close up. That may also be, I bent the tab a little bit while removing all the spot welds. So we'll bend it forward a little bit. That'll close up the gap. Cut just about right here. Glad we didn't go any farther. But yeah, I think the whole thing needs to shift forward just a hair. Although it looks like maybe that's just kind of the way it was stamped, because you can see we're dead on right here. So it's not going to be perfect because it's an aftermarket stamping. So we're going to have to massage things a little bit. Namely up here. We've got some bendage that we can apply there. And we're all good along here as we'd expect. I think I'll pop this off. I'll start cleaning up all of our weld areas. And well, just cleaning up everything because it's all rusty and gross. And then we'll go from there. We've got everything pretty much fitted. I cleaned up all of our spot welds that were sticking up. You can see we're sitting down in here decently. There's a big gap. And I was kind of thinking we were gonna just weld from this to this. And I'm still thinking that, but it's gonna be probably a little ugly. But we'll get her done and grade her down. Just because I can't access here very well to actually put plug welds on the factory seam. So that's going to be what it's going to be. I think what we need to do now is mark our transmission tunnel and cut. So I'm just going to make sure this is sitting down close to where it's going to be. I'll mark and then we'll cut probably an inch lower and just, you know, work our way closer to the line until we have them butted up perfectly, or as close to perfect as we're going to get. We do have a hole for the seatbelt here that we got to drill out, and then we got to pre-drill a whole bunch of holes for plug welds. So I'll just mark these with the pen, same on where the cross member lies. Once I got those all marked and that marked, I'll bring it back. Okay, so everything's cut roughly where it's going to be. What I'm going to do now is sink some self-tappers in just to pull everything tight up against the cross members. It'll probably sit down a little bit, and maybe we won't even need to cut the section along the tunnel anymore. We will see. Okay, so from under the car, I went ahead and marked all of our cross members so that we can drill some holes for plug welds. So we'll do that all the way along here, of course along the edges here, and back here, and then that edge, of course, we are going to plug weld. So we also have this piece, which you can see originally I was going to cut it out, then I realized it's part of the floor pan, so we'll probably touch that up with a weld and grind it back down. This is the seatbelt bolt, which is kind of important. Whoops. So we're going to cut the new floor pan in that square so that it fits, and then we'll butt weld to that. But other than that, I've got everything cleaned up. We'll probably spritz paint all over everything, and then in the places where we drill for plug welds, we'll clean the paint off so that we can get a good weld. Of course, we'll also clean all the junk out of the cross members, because now's the time to do it. And then up toward the front, since I just can't really get to the seam to plug weld, we'll just weld that seam solid like I was saying. But other than that, we're looking really good. So I'm gonna go through and drill some holes all along our cross members so we can plug weld. I'm gonna trim that to fit. I may actually trim it in the car so that we have a really good lineup with our butt weld. We'll see how that goes. Alright, so bring it back then. Alright, so I've drilled all of our plug weld holes. Probably went a little overboard, but better too many than not enough, right? I also cut our little hole for the seatbelt bolt over here, and I forgot I gotta cut that out. So, I'll do that, and then I am going to grind all the paint off there, probably hit it. We're gonna plug weld just to get the paint off. Not that it's a huge deal for this. Then we'll self-tapper her down and start welding. Okay, so we've got her basically screwed down to where she's gonna be. We don't even need to weld it. Just put a couple more self-tappers in and call her good. Nah, just kidding. But all we gotta do now is cut along the transmission tunnel. I think I'm just gonna do it with the floor in. And yeah, definitely brought dishonor to my family with that cut, but we can work with it. Everything fits pretty good. Pan's just a hair long in this place, or you know, the car might not be exactly kosher, but overall happy with the fit. Some of these holes drilled a little off, but they'll work just fine. What I'm going to do is just get the zip disc and cut along even with the new floor pan, and we should be good to go from there. Okay, so now I'll just clean up and get any dangling pieces off. I've got to break the one spot weld up there and back here. Once those are off, and I wire wheel everything, or flap disc, then we'll get to welding. So at this point, we're all prepped for welding. Since we're screwed down pretty good to all the structure, I think we're going to start by butt welding up to the transmission tunnel, since that's going to be the most critical weld as far as difficulty. And once that's in, we can kind of make sure everything is nice and flat to all the pinch weld surfaces, or all the plug weld surfaces. We'll just weld that seam like I was saying, and I'll just go through and start working our way through the plug welds as I go. The pan, no metal stamping. Aftermarket metal stamping is ever made perfect. It doesn't quite sit proper, and who knows, you know, cars vary by car. If there's anything that's way out, I'll just add more self-tappers. If I can, I'll just tap it with a hammer until it's flat. Like for example, this gap here for our seatbelt bolt, I'll probably just tap that in, and we should be good. I'm gonna start welding all our way along that seam. Alright, well I'm just gonna start stitching my way across. I don't think you can see anything with me in there, and I'll bring it back and we'll start plug welding. Okay, so got everything stitched in place at least. You gotta get under the car and push this part of the pan out a hair, but everything else is pretty much where it's gonna be. The worst area here is kind of together. The metal's just so kind of thin that it's really tough to actually bridge a gap. So it's mostly together, and I think what I'm going to do is get another piece of sheet metal and go over top, and we'll plug weld that onto here, and then we'll go around, just because we want this to be really structural. That's the plan there, but it's together and it's, you know, kind of where it needs to be, which is the main thing. So I got to lift the car up, tap that part out a little bit so that I can get that seam. Other than that, we're looking good. Okay, so I'm going to say we're pretty much good to go for this side. We have no shortage of nasty welds where the new pan meets the transmission tunnel. That's just kind of how it is with sheet metal, at least for me. I'm not saying a real welder wouldn't do better, but it doesn't really matter as long as it's, you know, fairly watertight, actually is penetrated into the sheet metal. Not that that's hard on something this thin. Then we're good, because, you know, it's getting covered up by undercoating, sound deadening, and carpet, so who cares? And seam sealer for that matter. Now we've got all the plug welds done, and then on the front I just put some stitches in between the panels. That should do just fine, and we'll cover everything in seam sealer just like it was from the factory to keep any water and whatnot out. I do need to make one little patch because there was something weird. I think there had been a repair in the past, so I had to grind some weird stuff out, but just make a little patch there from the outer side, patch that up, and weld down from up here, and then that'll get seam sealed. I'll also wire wheel all of that rust and give it a spritz of paint. But before I do all that, I need to replace the other floor pan. So it's just more of the same. I'm just gonna drill out the spot welds. We'll try that this time instead of grinding them, and just do the whole pan like this backside, because, or like the driver's side, because you can see the backside's also pretty rusty, so no sense in leaving that. And the only thing that's different on that side is I'm going to have to make a patch for the upper portion of that panel. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. I think what I'll do is remove everything and find where I gotta stop cutting up here. Once I know that, I'll get the floor pan in and tacked in place, and then I'll make the patch up there and just butt weld it to the floor pan. No need to make the spot weld seam like the factory panels have when we can just butt weld. So that's the plan there. I'm gonna start tearing that out just like I did before, and I'll bring you back once there's something new. I almost forgot to show you. Here's that little patch I made just to stiffen up the connection between seatbelt mounting nut and the floor pan, so that should be totally fine now. No biggie there. I think what I'm going to do for the other side is just leave this intact, and actually looking from the bottom, which I should have done initially, you can just separate this sheet metal from the steel plate that has the nut in it, so I'll just do that. In fact, weirdly enough, the passenger side came with a new one, so I don't know why they included that with this, but not the driver. No biggie. Not even really planning on using it, so that's fine. Passenger side is just more of the same. So our floor pan's out. Let's see, we got bits and pieces everywhere. So this lower portion of the firewall on the passenger side is pretty rusted. So I think what we're going to do is just cut all of this pitted metal out. Probably up and around here, and then back down here, because welding a new pan anywhere on here is going to be a nightmare with that pitted metal. So before I set the panel in, I think I'll just do that. Cut it out. I won't band it or anything, so that if we need to take a template at all, we can. It's going to be a real pain doing this part because it kicks out really far gone, so I don't think we have any other option really than cutting it out. And we don't have to match the curves perfectly. You know, we can go flat, 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 3 or 4 pieces and probably make it happen, but yeah, that's going to be annoying. So there's the piece I cut out. I had to grind it in half to get the spot welds out from that center support. I also accidentally cut through it, so I have to weld that back solid. So that's what we're going to have to make out of flat sheet metal, and I don't have anything special, so we'll be getting creative. You can see just how rotten this is. The undercoating kind of hit it from the underside, but yeah, it's no good. Up top it wasn't quite as bad, but I figured we're in here, it's not really any more work because we're already having to cut out this much, so might as well replace all the bad metal. So I think we're going to tackle that probably last because it is going to have to meet up with the floor pan. So what I'm going to do now is just clean up all of the floor pan contact areas, grind everything clean, clean out all of our passages and cavities, and then do the same thing I did on the other side with the floor pan. Probably just get it screwed in place, then we'll tackle that and we'll weld everything solid. So I'm going to start cleaning up and getting the transmission pan cut to size. Okay, so we got the floor pan fitting in now. Fits pretty good, just like the other side. Still need the trim down here. I think what I'm going to do next is sink some self-tappers into the rail here, our cross members there, and a couple back here, just to suck everything down. Then I'll mark and I'll cut with 1/8 of an inch or so extra hanging off so that we can hopefully get a nice butt weld. Up here we're looking pretty good. Yeah, once this is trimmed and it's basically ready to get welded, we'll get it zipped down with self-tappers again, and then we'll start fabricating that. And I don't think it'll be terrible if we just kind of piecemeal it out, because we don't really need all of the features that were present in that old piece. Like there was a hump here, we don't need that. So this can just probably be one single flat piece. That'll really simplify it. And then this up here has a complex curve, but I think if we maybe make it out of 2 pieces, it'll be easy. If we cut it or do a piece up here and then do a piece here, that probably won't be so bad. I don't think. This needs to suck way down. While I have this off, I'm going to clean the undercoating off of the underside and the top up here, and the same along here, because that's what kind of made the welding hard last time is I couldn't really get a good clean on here after I had this all sucked down. We're looking pretty decent here. Most of the way around that seam, you have hardly any gap. In fact, what I'm going to do is, we're slightly long right here, so I'll just trim a hair off the new pan, make it meet the transmission tunnel, and we'll just pry and get it tacked and it should be good. Had to do a little bit of massaging over here, but that should be fine. It's pretty much sitting where it's going to sit now, so I guess let's tackle this. I think what we're going to do is make a little cardboard model. I think we're probably best off making this its own piece because it's relatively flat. So we'll do that, and once that's tacked into place, we'll move on to the other piece, which will probably be a little bit more annoying, but that's okay. So I'm gonna go grab some paper and we'll get that traced out. So here's our template. It might look like a rectangle, but it's not. You can see you gotta cut just a little bit away from that to make it square-ish. And then this should give us a piece of metal that is pretty dang close to what we need. So let's go trace this out on some new metal and get it cut. So here's that traced out. So I'm just gonna go and probably leave a little bit extra. I'll cut on the other side of the line, and that'll give us enough to kind of work it into place. Okay, so here, the piece after some trimming fits pretty good. So there's a little bit of a curve to the panel. So what we'll do is we'll tack it over here on this side where my hand is, and then we'll just bend it in and make it flush. Should work good. So I'm going to clean up all of our weld surface and we'll get it tacked in place. Okay, I also drilled some holes on the plate so that we can plug weld to the inner structure over there. So let's start welding. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. It's nice and flush to every panel, so that's all good. We'll just leave that tacked for now until we get the other piece made. So I'm gonna get a piece of cardboard traced out for that, and we'll get to cutting. This one's gonna probably be a little bit more involved because we have it curving not only this way but also this way, so it's a compound curve. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe, just because I'm using 16 gauge, so it's not really super bendable, probably 18 would be ideal, but that's what I got right now, so we'll use it. But probably what I'll do is make one piece that goes from here down, because this is relatively flat right here, and we'll have another piece that goes to this, and another piece yet that goes there. I'm guessing that's what I'll end up with, but I'll bring it back once we got the templates. So here's our next template. It's another pretty simple rectangular kind of piece. The only difference is we're gonna have to match up with this panel, which has that pinch weld with this floor pan. So it's gonna, instead of going to the top of this panel, it's going to be partway down, which is fine. So I'll cut this out and we'll get it tacked in place. Okay, so here's our piece. It's fairly close, so I'm gonna get that tacked and then we'll move on to the hard ones. Oh, well, apparently I forgot to start the camera, but it's in a really tough position for me to get into while holding it. So there's some interesting welds that it's tacked, which is all we need right now. Now we have a little bit more complex pieces to make. I don't know if it shows up very well on camera, but this piece is a good 2 inches back, and then also it's curving in this direction, like that. So we're gonna have to see about that. You'll have to think about the best way to split that up into pieces. We could just kind of fudge it and do straight pieces, but we'll see. Okay, so what I think I'm gonna have to do for this piece is just do small sections like this, form them up, and then weld them in, and then weld them all solid after they're tacked, just because I don't have a shrinker, stretcher, or anything, so I can't make complex stuff super easily. But here's an example, and you see this has a weird curve. I just would grab it with vice grips and kind of tap them where I think the bend needs to be, and then just adjust after test fit. And you can see this is pretty close. A little bit of trimming, and then it will be just fine. Especially after grinding, we can kind of soften this edge here make it nice and rounded. I may actually tap this down a little bit so it's a little curved. Tack down here and tap. But that's what I'm gonna do. I'll just work my way through making small pieces until we're all the way at the bottom. Got 3 strips in place and so far it's looking good. They're all pretty even. Definitely won't be able to tell after the ground that they're multiple pieces. But I think this is gonna work out well. So I'm gonna keep moving along. Okay, we got all our little slices put in. I'm really happy with how that turned out. Let me show you from the other side, you can kind of see it. The curvature a little bit better. So I'm really happy with that. A little bit of grinder work after we weld everything. It'll look like just a continuous piece of metal, which is the goal. And once you get it all undercoated and everything, you probably won't even be able to tell. I mean, you know there's supposed to be a kick out here, but if you didn't know that. So yeah, looks pretty good to me. See, it's not that much different than the other side. There's just no stiffening seam down the middle of that flat piece on the right. So what I'm gonna do now is just go through and stitch all these pieces together. It's gonna be kind of ugly once we finish, just because they're gonna be like tack, tack, tack. You know, just stitching everything together. And you know what? Actually, before I do that, I think I'm gonna weld this all solid, just to keep everything stationary. There's just a little bit of trimming I gotta do on this, on the pan. I'll just do on the floor pan because obviously I can't take it out now. And then yeah, I'll just stitch that together, get it tacked, and then we'll stitch that. And what we're gonna do with that is use probably like a die grinder with a grinding disc on it, grind everything smooth, get our curves the way we want it, and that should be good to go. So yeah, I'm gonna weld the pan solid. Okay, we've got everything mostly welded. Ugly, but again, it's getting all ground off. I think I'm gonna let it cool, and then I'll hit the backside too, so we have a little bit more meat to grind into, especially where the new metal meets the old metal. Definitely gonna want as much meat as possible there, but we're looking good. Okay, so I think we are just about done with the welding, at least. Seem to get all the junk out of the way. Okay, so got everything welded in. You can see it's kind of a miserable day. So water's getting in everywhere. I'm gonna have to clean up really good before we paint. But passenger floor pan's all welded in. Again, not pretty, but it's thin sheet metal, so it's about the best I can do. The kick panel area, also not perfect. You'll see I left some ugly welds just because the existing metal is so punky that it's really hard to weld to. I mean, you guys probably know how it goes. You hit it once and it blows away, and you just got to keep kind of building it back up. So if I weld all the welds nice, then it gets so thin that the old metal kind of starts showing through. So we're gonna leave it like that. This is all getting covered by carpet anyway, so who cares? And then on the outside, you can see it's gonna get covered by kind of this similar undercoating stuff. So you won't even really be able to tell. But I'm happy with it. It's sealed at least, and it's not gonna, you know, kick through like the old one. So I'm gonna call that a win. The next thing we're gonna need to do is paint everything and then seam seal all the seals. So we'll seam seal along here and here to keep water out. We're letting it in right now, which is not ideal, but it should stay pretty dry once we close the door. Today it's a little too cold for that, so I'm probably gonna have to wait a couple days before I can do that. And because of that, I will probably just do that next video. So next time we've got more sheet metal work. Yay. Actually, it's not too bad, but what we're gonna have to do is, I may have already shown this. Yeah, it's covered by slush right now, but there are some rust holes back here from the vinyl top. So next time we're going to be pulling the rear window out and reconstructing any of those that need to be reconstructed, just so that it's watertight. If you were going to put a vinyl top back on this, you probably wouldn't necessarily need to go crazy fixing those, because the vinyl top would keep it out, but I don't think this is getting a vinyl top. So we'll fix any rust that we can find on the top, get it back to where it should be, and go from there. So I will see you guys then. Hopefully it's a little bit nicer then.